Yes, Derek.
Well, there's so many exciting things that are happening, and part of what we have to do is really sort of put them all together so that there's synergies there. But I mean, I think many of us were just so excited when the Google Foundation announced $4 million for Nature Bridge and the opportunity to expand Nature Bridge to the East Coast and do something at Prince William Forest Park. Great news, not only because it's $4 million, but because it's from Google, because I think Google does understand something about the connection between 21st century Americans and how to use social media in that. But I also want to compliment the administration for its commitment to making sure that there's some outreach and promotion. The fee-free days, for example, for national parks, a great thing. You know, but even saying that, we had Oprah visiting a national park, we had fee-free days, we had a Ken Burns PBS special, and yet in 2010, visitation to the national park system went down 2%. We had near records or records at some of the iconic parks, but there are 394 units, and the population of the United States has grown by 26% since 1987, while overall visitation has declined by almost 10%, and if you look at the hours of visitation in national parks, it's down almost 20%. We need to do something better, we need to do something consistent, we need to do something as a team in terms of just reaching people. The average American receives 5,000 messages every day in terms of various kinds of things to do with your time and things to use with your dollars. We really need to look at this communications outreach marketing program as a team in a very new and energetic way.
That's a great point. I'll speak to that, Derek, but what I'm going to say is much more broadly applicable, and that is that the federal government is going to need to work with the private sector and the nonprofit sector to be effective in executing these things. I really doubt that within our federal family, we're going to come up with the best ideas about how to engage social media. You know, there are people at Google, there are people in lots of other, Facebook, et cetera, who are going to be much better at figuring out that part of it out. And so it's a great point that Google is invested in this idea, and an expression of interest in this area is really important. So we've got to reach out to foundations, to nonprofits, to businesses, to figure out how we can do this, whether it be solving this particular problem you have, or in the case of increasing access to outdoor recreation, taking advantage of good relationships with some of the companies that provide canoes or kayaks or boats of one sort or another to get people out on the river, especially in the urban context. Yes?
Sort of related to that, was wondering if there's anything in the report related to improved use of technology, web, reservations, trip planning. Did that come up in the...
It did. It did. A much better coordinated effort is recommended by thousands of people probably around recreation, reservations, coordination. It's not just sort of the efficiency of the reservation system, but we've heard a lot of different things. I mean, I'll tell you one thing that was really interesting to me is that military families are very concerned about how the reservation system works, because if you're deployed in Afghanistan or Iran and you get notice that you got to come home, you may not get that notice until 2 weeks before you're going home. And by that time, all the campsites are reserved at Yellowstone, Yosemite, and Rocky Mountain, where else you might want to go. And so that's a different kind of a flaw than you're probably thinking about, but nonetheless, it's one that we ought to think about. And so we're actually looking at how we can hold back some of the reservations for military families. But we did hear that the need for coordination and collaboration among our federal agencies that are providing reservations to our public lands is critical. Recreation.gov has been a good tool, but we think we can make it better. Yes, in the back.
You mentioned before that one of the objectives is to reconnect young people, their families with the outdoors, and make it relevant. How do you do that? How do you think that can happen?
Well, I think some of it is helping to provide there's sort of a facility piece of it, an infrastructure piece. We need to do, if you look at some maps of some cities, you find that there are certain areas that are park deserts. There's very little access for, millions of people who live in cities for realistic access to anything of a quality nature in their community. And so that's one thing we can do tangibly. We can identify those park deserts, and I think there's some indicators that organizations and agencies have come up with that, we ought to be within a 10-minute, every child ought to be within a 10-minute walk of an open space or park or trail from where they live. So that's something very tangible that we can do. On the programmatic side, I think we get to what Derek has talked about. How are we going to connect with young people? What are the ways in which they get their communications? And we need to get better at driving their interest through connecting with them in that way. And whether through Twitter or Facebook or MySpace, whatever it might be, we need to figure out better ways of connecting people at a minimum in that way. I also think that we need to figure out ways to better engage parents. We heard in almost all of the youth listening sessions from a lot of the kids there that, listen, one of the reasons that we don't go outside is because our parents don't and didn't. And if they did, then we would have. And yet they're working too hard, they don't know where to go, it's not easy for them, we don't have a car, whatever it might be. So we need to look at the barriers for families to participate. Because we found that when families participate, the children carry that on to the future generation. So those are a few ideas. It's going to take time. I don't want to sugarcoat it and tell you we're going to get this done in a year or two. It's going to take a while to solve this problem, but it's going to take everybody's help to get it done. Doctor?
Is red fields to green fields on your radar screen, Will? And if so, what kind of future does that program have from your perspective?
Dr. Crum is talking about red fields and green fields. I don't know if anybody knows what that is, but it's looking at the foreclosed properties within urban areas mostly, which are red fields, so they're in the red, and converting those places to green spaces or something of use to the public. And I actually had a wonderful briefing from their director a few months ago, and looking at the case studies they've done all over the country about where those things exist. And if there's a huge amount of vacant property, Detroit's a great example of that, where there's just blocks and blocks and blocks of uninhabited properties. And if you can buy them for a song right now. And there's an opportunity to really go into these inner city areas where there are there's very little open space or green space, and where there is a desire to have economic vitality returned. So I think there is a great opportunity. It's to be honest with you, I don't think we're really set up that well to deal with that. There isn't like a pot of money like there was with the savings and loan problem back in the 80s and 90s, where we kind of had a bailout area, but we need to be creative. I actually had a chance to talk to Secretary Donovan about this about a month ago, and he's focused on this. He's got somebody on his team who's thinking about this problem as well, because as they're providing affordable housing, they want to make sure that those housing facilities are in a place where people want to live. And so there's a chance to do both over there. All right, last question, Derek.
Then I'll have to combine two into one. One thing that Tom Strickland was very excited about doing when he first came to Washington was following up on his service on the National Recreation Lake Study Commission. We identified through that commission about almost 2,000 man-made federal reservoirs managed by agencies like the Corps and the Bureau of Reclamation that in many cases don't have the kind of recreation and conservation mission that probably seems appropriate for the 21st century. And I would just urge you to make sure that after now the Gulf oil spill and some other things are behind us, we not lose focus on the fact that we have this rich resource about that. And the second point I would make is that one of GOCO's real gems was to preserve existing uses of open space by encouraging those ranchers and farmers and timber lot owners and others to stay in the business. Part of what we have to do is make it economically viable for them to do that, just as we now have programs through the Farm Bill to try to encourage use of land for wildlife and things like that. It seems to me that we probably should be looking at ways to to incentivize private landowners to provide access for trails and for other kinds of things. And just your comments about whether that's consistent with,
Sure.
with what GoCo found.
Sure. On the first point, yes, on lakes, we're aware of that, and we're staying as focused as we can on that. It's really part of the rivers, lakes, and streams initiatives that we're looking at, and how we can both promote the natural resources and recreational values of those places. The second question is a good one, because that's where I spent most of my professional life, is working on the private land side, and trying to develop organizational infrastructure and financial incentives and policies to encourage that type of activity. And I think in Colorado, we've had significant success around that with the state conservation easement tax credit, GoCo, set aside lands from our state lands, et cetera. So that's been a real hallmark of success, not just in Colorado, but throughout the West. And we've created a set of organizations through the cattlemen's associations to actually be the holders of a lot of those conservation easements. So Congress also, the tax extenders bill, extended for 2 years the conservation easement incentives, that significantly increased incentives for landowners, especially farmers and ranchers, to do just what you said. So the question that you get at, however, is something that has traditionally been somewhat more sensitive, just because farmers and ranchers and foresters aren't always don't always want to have somebody on their land, and in some cases it's not going to be appropriate to have access on the land. All right, one last question, or you can catch me afterwards. All right, one last question. Go ahead, Scott, while Jerry's walking up
This
there.
may be one you don't want to address, but given the new Congress, is your level of confidence that programs under AGO will survive the would you say, 30% reduction that might be out there?
Well, I don't really have a crystal ball, but you know, the way the system works is that there are 2 houses in Congress and there's an executive branch. And so just because one house wants to do something doesn't mean that's where it's going to end up. There'll be a negotiation, there'll be the sausage making that happens on the Hill, and the administration will have its way, have its influence as well. So as I said before, I think that the concepts and values and the goals of Americans for Great Outdoors are nonpartisan, or they're bipartisan, and so I think this is an area where we can find that middle ground. I think the rubber will hit the road on the budget more than anything else. We're not proposing, I can tell you, radical changes in the policy of this country around these issues. The fundamental policies are in good shape. We're focusing on things that we can actually do. We felt if we were proposing a series of 10 new bills that would delay our start of getting this stuff done, because it takes a long time to get things through Congress. So we're not focusing on the legislative agenda, but we do need to be able to manifest our goals in these programs through the budget. And so that's an unknown at this point. We are hoping that we can, with your help, convince the Congress to do the right thing. Thank you.